Story 1. Any lawmaker or judge whose immediate family, spouse, child, parent, sibling, is in an industry affected by the legislation must recuse themselves from voting on it. For example, Joe Lieberman, who opposed the public option for the Affordable Care Act, has a wife in the health insurance industry. Story 2. All political contributions are illegal and considered bribery, except for a maximum donation of $25 annually per person. Story 3. Term limits for all elected officials. If a president can serve only 2 terms, then the same should apply to everyone else. Story 4. Tie the CEO and top earners' pay to the bottom. They are allowed to make more up to a specific cap, such as 30 times more, rather than the current structure. Story 5. I would either end corporate personhood or ban all elected officials from trading in the stock market, except possibly through an enforced blind trust. Story 6. Every bill to be considered will be read in its entirety by its author before it can be voted on. All co-sponsors will stand next to the author during the reading. No sitting down or bathroom breaks will be allowed. This approach will significantly reduce the length of bills. The goal is to encourage lawmakers to stop including unnecessary provisions in other bills. If a clean bill cannot pass, it should not become law. Story 7. The maximum amount any individual, corporation, organization, or other fund can contribute to a political campaign is $10. Story 8. Politicians must tell the unfiltered truth. Otherwise, they face public backlash and harsh criticism. Story 9. You cannot block people's driveways or park on their land. Yes, I am based in the UK, and those things are technically legal. Story 10. The fines for businesses that break laws should always exceed the profit made from such violations and may not be reduced. Story 11. Politicians are licensed like lawyers and have rules of conduct that can lead to disbarment. A few individuals are making decisions for millions without qualifications or oversight, and without a commitment to do no harm. We are acting irrationally. Story 12. Laws should apply to everyone equally, and spending millions of dollars on lawyers does not make you innocent. Story 13. Corporations are not individuals and should be held to different standards for criminal behavior. Executives should not be immune from accountability. Story 14. All lawns must be removed and replaced with native plants suitable for the area or used for growing crops. Story 15. There should be a limit on the amount of money that can be donated to any political candidate by a single entity, whether a person or a corporation. Story 16. Bring back the fairness doctrine. We had no idea how crucial that was to a better informed or less misinformed citizenry. Story 17. A person can have a maximum of $10 million at one time, and any amount over that should be donated to charity. Story 18. Outlawing Fox News and other blatant propaganda masquerading as news should have been done in the 2000s. Alternatively, the fairness doctrine should never have been repealed. Story 19. It is now illegal for politicians, lawmakers, lobbyists, public servants, and those contracted by the government to lie or knowingly misguide the public. They will have their assets seized and will spend a mandatory minimum of 10 years in prison. Story 20. Police officers who commit felonies such as assault or rape are prohibited from working in another department and are placed on a registry that informs potential employers of their violation of public trust. Story 21. I would create a law to abolish the Electoral College and prevent the establishment of a similar system. The popular vote should determine elections, and there is no justification for gerrymandering. Story 22. All elected officials have their finances audited annually and face substantial fines if discrepancies arise. Story 23. The lowest paid employee of a company must be compensated no less than 100 times less than the compensation of the highest paid employee. If the chief executive officers receive 10,000 shares, every employee should receive 100 shares. This policy will encourage profitable companies to reward all employees, not just the chief executive officers. Story 24. There is a national campaign fund that presidential candidates divide evenly, and that is all the money that can be spent on their election. No political action committees, no private donors. Money is no longer speech. Story 25. I would establish a law requiring mandatory toothbrushing. People are too lax about personal hygiene, which is unacceptable. Mandatory toothbrushing for everyone, with punishment for noncompliance being assignment to a work camp. Story 26. No one can have more than $1 billion. Essentially, every dollar over $1 billion is taxed at approximately 99 to 100%. Additionally, felons cannot hold public office. Story 27. If you are a democratically elected official, you will be paid a fair salary. However, you and your immediate family cannot, under any circumstances, own stocks in publicly traded companies. This will be consistently monitored by a government agency to prevent any conflicts of interest. Story 28. Make divorce more challenging, mandate DNA tests for children, and provide support based on the reasons for the divorce. Story 29. Once you are worth over 500 million, you have succeeded and maximized capitalism. All earnings beyond that are automatically taxed at 100%. Story 30. There's a new day made after Friday and before Saturday. I don't care what you call it. It's part of the weekend. Story 31. No employee of any company can earn more than 400 times the total compensation of the lowest paid employee. Story 32. We already have many laws. They are not enforced if you are wealthy. If my fellow Americans cannot be bothered to enforce the law, what good is a law? Story 33. Functional MRI is for individuals seeking power, with results publicly available. If their intellect activates in response to emotional stimuli, indicating a lack of empathy, it will be considered by employers, boards, and voters. Story 34. People and news agencies must support everything they say with facts and be held accountable for falsehoods and inciting the public. The public is tired of constant fear-mongering for ratings. Story 35. In the United States, extend the school year by 40 to 50 days. Provide national funding to raise teacher salaries by 20% and establish a standard salary that aligns with the national average, plus 20%, using a standardized step system. We lag behind other nations, partly due to the amount of time our students are out of school compared to their peers. Extending the school year allows for a more consistent educational experience and provides additional time for instruction. This should include appropriately spaced breaks throughout the year, typically 2 to 3 weeks, usually between standardized semesters. It is strongly recommended to have aftercare and camp programs available for families as well. Story 36. Anyone in elected office found displaying a direct, consistent, and willful lack of empathy will be removed from office. A person who cannot empathize cannot represent everyone in their districts. They can only represent themselves and their group, regardless of which side of the aisle they were elected to. Story 37. In the United States, there should be term limits for Congress. Additionally, Congress members should receive $1 million per year for their service. The reason for the high salary is to eliminate the temptation of engaging with lobbyists, which would be illegal. Outside corporate contributions should also be prohibited. If any member is found to be in communication with a lobbyist or receiving compensation from a corporation, they would face severe legal consequences, including imprisonment. After their term, they would return to their previous jobs. Story 38. End slavery. This is a nonpartisan perspective. Technically, prisoners can still be considered slaves in the United States. Story 39. Music or soundproofing in all bathrooms everywhere. Individual rooms as bathrooms should be mandatory everywhere, similar to Bucky's style. Story 40. The difference in pay within any business or organization cannot exceed 100 times. It should only be 10 times, but even a 100 times limit would do a world of good. Story 41. A law for mandatory education in critical thinking and digital literacy at an early age is essential. With the rise of artificial intelligence, there is more misinformation than ever. Story 42. You must pass a test of common sense and critical thinking to be eligible to run for any government office. Story 43. Don't be unkind. It's not really a law as such. It's more along the lines of the only commandment that matters to humanity. Story 44. Reciprocal morality means you will be treated according to how you treat others. Story 45. Littering carries a hefty fine. The first offense incurs a fine of $750, and if you cannot afford it, the Internal Revenue Service will garnish your wages for a duration deemed appropriate based on your income. Additionally, this offense includes 1 working day of community service. The second offense results in a fine of $1,500 and 1 week of community service. The third offense carries a fine of $5,000, 72 hours in jail, and 15 days of community service. The fourth offense incurs a fine of $7,500, 1 week in jail, and 25 days of community service. The fifth offense results in a fine of $12,500, 1 month in jail, and 45 days of community service. The sixth offense carries a fine of $25,000, 90 days in jail, and 6 months of community service. The seventh offense incurs a fine of $40,000, 180 days in jail, and 1 year of community service. The eighth offense results in a fine of $75,000, 360 days in jail, and 2 years of community service. The ninth offense carries a fine of $100,000, 5 years in jail, and 3 years of community service. The 10th offense incurs a fine of $250,000, 10 years in jail, and 5 years of community service. Story 46. No billionaires. At 999 million, you have won at capitalism, and everything from here gets redistributed. Story 47. Education funding receives more money than anything else. We prioritize the children first. Everything else follows. Story 48. Television commercials are limited to 6 minutes per hour, whether on cable, streaming, or network. Additionally, drug commercials are not permitted. Story 49. Mandate a 4-day work week with hourly rates adjusted to match the current 5-day pay. Shifts longer than 12 hours are not permitted, and any excess profits earned by the company must contribute to an employee bonus. Story 50. Every person who can reasonably work must work at least 1 year in the service industry within 5 years of turning 18 years of age. This requirement ensures that individuals experience the challenges of being a worker and do not look down on them as many do today. If you are terminated during this time, you must find another job in the same industry. Story 51. You cannot have more wealth than $10 million. Once you reach that amount, congratulations, you have reached the top. You are not allowed to have more. It is that simple. Story 52. I would ban circumcision. The book Circumcision. The Hidden Trauma discusses how this practice contributes to various social issues. Countries that perform circumcision tend to have higher rates of rape, crime, and conflict. Story 53. I would create a new category of laws called executive laws that would apply to executives, politicians, spokespeople, religious leaders, telemarketers, and anyone else whose position in society requires them to address the public. If I had to choose one specific law, I would establish a law that uses hate speech legislation as a basis to punish these groups for misleading the public and sowing discord. This law would consider any attempt to use misinformation or lies that can be verified as false and demonstrably intended to convince the public to support a specific cause or purchase a product that does not deliver on its claims as a form of domestic terrorism. The punishment would be less severe than that for violent domestic terrorism, but it would still be classified as a felony, with the classification depending on the severity of the actions taken to convince the masses. If the masses then commit violent crimes as a result of these claims, the charges would be upgraded to actual violent domestic terrorism for those who spread the misinformation or lies. Story 54. If you make over $1 billion a year, you can keep that billion. However, any amount above $1 billion yearly will be taxed to fund social initiatives. Story 55. I would propose an amendment to make it illegal to run for or hold public office if convicted of a felony, to prohibit individuals over the age of 75 from running for or holding public office, to set term limits for Congress, and to implement restrictions on lobbying by establishing very low financial caps on contributions to encourage debate rather than bribery. If individuals wish to engage in bribery, they must do so covertly, which is already illegal and can lead to consequences. While this may not be foolproof, having legal methods with limits tends to be more effective than outright bans, which could foster further corruption. Additionally, congressional districts would be created using population concentration maps that do not factor in race, wealth, age, gender, etc., by employing a computer model to produce various maps. These maps would then be reviewed by a committee of supposed unbiased observers to select the most appropriate one. It could also be beneficial to incorporate this process into jury duty in each state. A random selection of 12 individuals could be tasked with choosing the best map. Multiple rounds of selection could be conducted, ultimately resulting in a map that is less likely to be influenced by political maneuvering, as it would be derived from pre-selected computer-generated designs with random citizens rather than career politicians advocating for them. Another option would be to hold a statewide vote for the best map. Although this could attract political interference through campaign advertisements, despite the intention to ensure fairness. I understand this does not resolve all issues, but I believe it represents a comprehensive approach that could realistically be included in a single amendment. If someone were to campaign on a platform similar to this, they would have my immediate support. Story 56. Require elected officials to live on minimum wage and freeze their assets. This includes commuting to work, paying taxes, rent, and all related expenses. Story 57. No billionaires. None. Zero. The moment you have $1 billion, every additional penny, including assets and stocks, goes to socialized healthcare and education in your country. Story 58. Change all federal, state, and local elections to ranked choice voting. Yes, I know other voting methods also have their advantages, but ranked choice voting has already been well vetted in a number of state and local elections and is easy to understand, so that would be my choice. I would support approval voting or any other form of voting that could help weaken the entrenched two-party system and open things up to new voices in politics. Story 59. I am working to pass the Restore Democracy Amendment to eliminate foreign and corporate dark money from U.S. politics. Another option is to encourage your representatives to support Elizabeth Warren's Accountable Capitalism Act. Story 60. Poverty should be eradicated. Eliminating poverty would have a monumental impact on our society. Every human being deserves to live with dignity. Story 61. Listen to an opposing point of view and consider their perspective with heartfelt consideration. We could discuss the inequality of wealth and greed, which is a valid conversation, but genuine empathy could accomplish so much more. Story 62. All lawsuits that go to court are settled in one day. If the petitioner cannot prove their case in 90 minutes, the defendant is released. All juries are staffed by rotating lawyers and judges assigned randomly. Petitioners can appeal but must pay the defendant's costs upfront. Story 63. The problem with any law is that, unless it is a lengthy document filled with specific details and a guarantee to enforce it, it will always lead to unintended consequences. This may result in an action due to loopholes or refusal to enforce the law, or it could make situations worse because of bad actors. The systems that govern society are corrupted and need to be restructured. No single law will resolve these issues. Furthermore, there is the need to overturn the Citizens United decision, address lobbying as a whole, or establish regulations that prevent elected officials from holding stocks or engaging with anyone who owns stocks that could benefit them. Additionally, it is important to enshrine clear anti-discrimination policies in the Constitution and to remove the exception for slavery in order to ensure that slavery is unequivocally illegal. Story 64. If your news does not tell the truth, you must put a disclaimer on it, and you cannot call yourself news. The law is punishable by being flung into space without a spacesuit. Story 65. The universal right to organize and collectively bargain is something you would expect to have, but unfortunately, it does not exist in the United States. Story 66. No trial for certain crimes, such as child abuse, drug dealing, rape, theft, and murder, especially when there is evidence. A quick execution is warranted. Story 67. Everyone is prohibited from posting their political and religious beliefs on social media at any time. Story 68. Reporters cannot knowingly report falsehoods. Even when writing editorials, both sides must be presented with equal fervor in the same publication or television segment. Story 69. If a political party promises to accomplish a specific number of tasks before the election but fails to deliver or does the opposite, All politicians from that party should face imprisonment for at least 20 years. Story 70. Dueling should make a comeback. Politicians, abusers, and other wrongdoers can all face the consequences. It is appropriate for all audiences. Story 71. No more religious influence in the laws we create. There must be a secular reason for a law or policy. If the only justification you have for a policy is that it aligns with your interpretation of divine intention, then it will not be taken into consideration. The same applies to laws that are anti-religious. Focus on the facts, data, and outcomes of actions similar to those proposed in the law. Story 72. The speed limit on highways in the United States, where there are long stretches of road with at least 2 lanes on both sides, is 85 miles per hour in the left-hand lane. If you go slower than that, you need to be in the rightmost lanes unless passing, and this rule is strictly enforced. If you go faster than 85 or slower than 80, you will receive mandatory tickets with escalated penalties for repeat offenders. Cars today can handle faster speeds compared to vehicles manufactured 20, 30, or 40 years ago. 90% of drivers travel at 80 miles per hour on major highways and slam on the brakes when they think they see police, while those traveling much slower than the average flow of traffic create bottlenecks for everyone. High visibility signage and signals are necessary to notify drivers when they enter or exit these zones. Story 73. Healthcare reform should include universal healthcare and free college for individuals in the medical field. This approach would reduce wait times to see a doctor and ensure that all medical services are covered. Story 74. A 90% wealth tax on millionaires and billionaires, which goes into public infrastructure and the common welfare. Story 75. No individual with wealth in the top 5% can hold a government office. Their finances must be completely transparent, as well as those of any family member who has more than 5%. Additionally, all political spending for the candidate is considered part of their personal wealth. In summary, you can either be wealthy or hold a government office, but not both. Story 76. Anyone in an elected position must not lie to gain influence from their position. It would resolve many political issues if people understood what they were voting for, instead of being misled by bait-and-switch tactics, or if they had a clear understanding of when individuals were being influenced by inappropriate factors. Story 77. For every 11 million people in a state, that state receives an additional electoral vote, with the electoral votes divided evenly among its voting districts. For example, California would have 3 voting districts with 57 votes among them, with all uneven votes going to the district that includes the capital. Texas would have 2 voting districts with 42 votes divided among them. Florida would have 2 voting districts with 32 votes divided among them. I am not entirely in favor of abolishing the Electoral College. I support the idea of allowing different regions of the country to have some influence, but the original system did not account for the significant population disparities among modern states. This change would make states with large populations more competitive. Candidates like Trump and Harris rarely campaigned in California or Texas because they know that the population dynamics heavily favor one side. Republicans have little chance of representation in California, while Democrats face similar challenges in Texas. Story 78. Voting rights extend to all citizens aged 18 or older who are not incarcerated for serious felonies and have not been found guilty of significant crimes. Served your time? You can vote. Out on parole or bail? You can vote. Owe civil fees and fines? You still can vote. Only individuals with mental illness, injury, or disability severe enough to incapacitate them to the point where they cannot serve as a witness in court or assist in their own defense, or those found guilty of election fraud cannot vote. Everyone else, you get a vote. States do not have the authority to decide that you are unworthy of voting because you previously committed a crime. This is a federal law that prevails over all. I am watching states like Mississippi and Florida closely. Story 79. No elected or appointed politician, judge, or member of the cabinet can hold any governmental position for more than a total of 6 years. Any direct or indirect financial or asset value gains, other than salary, while in office are illegal for the period served. Violation of this rule will result in a prison sentence directly proportional to the monetary worth of illegal gains. 1 year in prison for an amount equal to the average annual income for the lowest earning 10% of the population. Story 80. I have thought about this a lot. I would create a law against cults that protects freedom of religion. This would start by establishing a legal definition for a cult and reforming the Department of Religious Affairs into an ethics committee that audits every religion equally for specific criteria, mainly related to abuse. If no one is being harmed, your religion is valid. If you are abusing your followers, you are the problem. Thank you for tolerating my passionate rant. Story 81. Everything a person makes over $999,999.99 is taxable income. You receive a trophy that says you won capitalism, and the rest funds the entire government. Everyone else pays a flat 5% income tax. Story 82. End private equity and stock market manipulation. Disband the Securities and Exchange Commission. Move their responsibilities to the Department of Justice. Give them real authority. Allow competition to flourish again. Story 83. Eliminate the Citizens United ruling that allows corporations to spend unlimited money on political contributions. Next, I would establish term limits for Supreme Court justices and all politicians. Additionally, I would make it a felony for politicians to engage in insider trading, which would result in imprisonment for the rest of us. Story 84. Tailgating results in your license being revoked. You must wait at least 6 months before you can retake the driving test. If it occurs 3 times, you can no longer apply for a driving license. Story 85. Here is my favorite idea for a new law. When buying a house, the buyer must pay a fee at closing that increases with each home they already own. For example, it could be 0% for the first home, 5% for the second, 10% for the third, 20% for the fourth, and so on. This would increase the housing supply for first-time homebuyers and discourage rent-seeking behavior that has turned our housing market into a speculative investment market. The revenue collected from the fee could be used to stimulate affordable housing development to offset any lost interest from developers in continuing to build houses. Story 86. Anyone proven to be petitioning a government member for illegal ends, such as corruption or fraud, as well as the government officials involved, would receive the death sentence. Story 87. Remove or limit lobbying to something like $10 per person per year. If Coca-Cola wants to contribute $1 million towards something, they need to gather their employees to each give $10. They will not be able to lobby for anything else that year. Story 88. Everyone has their bank account balance and all transactions made public. This could end corruption, but it may lead to many people asking you for money. Could be interesting to see what would happen. Story 89. Public funding for all elections means that each person or company can only spend $20 a year to influence elections or public opinion. This would lead to the disappearance of Fox News, MSNBC, OANN, and similar outlets. Story 90. If you have been convicted of a felony, you are not permitted to be President of the United States. Story 91. You can confront someone when they deserve it. Anyone. No punishment. People would be much kinder if they knew there would be consequences when they stepped out of line. Story 92. Judicial discretion in sentencing is subject to review by the jury that tried the case. No more judges handing down light sentences to wealthy and privileged criminals. The punishments will fit the crimes. Story 93. Every year of their term, any elected official should have progress on promises made during their campaign evaluated, and people can retract their votes if they wish. Story 94. A law that states any politician who acts on behalf of or is affiliated with a corporation, instead of working solely for the benefit of the population, will be executed. Story 95. Mandatory service in the Peace Corps, military, or AmeriCorps is required to qualify for Social Security, voting, and owning property. Anything a citizen enjoys. No exceptions for medical conditions. Story 96. No person may have a net worth higher than $1 billion. Any money made beyond that will be taxed at 100%, and the funds will be allocated toward low-income housing, new schools, and improved healthcare. Story 97. Everyone has to serve their country in some manner, whether that is through military service or certain volunteer organizations. At least 3 months of service must be completed within a year of graduating high school. The world would be a better place. Story 98. No laws are going to help in my opinion. Too many are being broken and enforcement cannot keep up. I would rather focus less on new laws and more on improving the enforcement of existing laws. Story 99. Absolutely no government lobbying. It leads to corruption and preferential treatment for companies that exploit people and the environment. Story 100. No billionaires allowed. Whatever method you choose to address this through taxation, incentives, nationalizing their assets, or other approaches, extreme wealth only benefits the rich. It does not contribute to society in any meaningful way. Story 101. I would make homeschooling illegal. All it does is create people who know how to do arithmetic and read, but don't know how to think. Story 102. $25,000 yearly, tax-free, to any adult citizen as a base payment that would help many rise out of poverty. Story 103. Mandate remote work as an option for jobs that can be performed without physical presence. It saves childcare costs, reduces travel expenses, provides better job opportunities for individuals in lower-income communities, and makes work more accessible for those with social anxiety. For environmentalists, this is one of the quickest ways to reduce unnecessary carbon footprints. Story 104. No one person is allowed to have a total estate worth greater than $100 million, adjusted for inflation. Story 105. Not a law, but I would crumble up and set fire to the Department of Justice memo preventing them from prosecuting a sitting president. Story 106. Price freeze. What it cost 20 years ago is what it costs today. Taxes may disappear to keep the price low if needed. Story 107. Elected officials must take and pass the citizenship test, with a passing grade of 9 out of 10, in order to stand for re-election. They must do this each time they run for re-election. I emphasize re-election intentionally, as it could otherwise create a barrier to entry for new candidates. Story 108. Fraud should be illegal with serious consequences. There should be no lying in advertisements, political campaigns, job postings, or during testimony, even for law enforcement officers. Failing to prove, when audited, that public statements are supported by evidence should be punished severely. This may include the requirement for a complete refund to every customer, payment of hourly wages to every job applicant for their wasted time, jail time for those deemed responsible, automatic disqualification from political office, removal of applicable licenses for professionals, and firing and blacklisting of government employees. Some leniency may be allowed for genuine mistakes or unintentional actions by marketing employees if they publish loud retractions promptly. However, getting caught lying intentionally should have serious repercussions that can ruin one's life or destroy a company. Unfortunately, establishing a regulatory oversight commission to enforce these standards fairly and without bias is likely very difficult, if not impossible, even with political will. However, such a system would be beneficial. Story 109. No one can give money to campaigns. All political campaigns must be publicly funded. Bring all the corrupt politicians back to us. Outlaw super PACs. Outlaw lobbyists. Outlaw insider trading. In fact, it may be better to have a district lottery similar to jury duty. Select 12 random people. We review their resumes and vote. Zero campaigns. Story 110. No one is allowed to make more than 10 times their lowest paid employee, including contractors and interns, in total income, bonuses, and stock options. Story 111. Cap politicians' total worth to a specific amount according to their age. They must also disclose financial information annually, and perhaps have a different group of qualified citizens oversee the disclosure each year. These individuals could undergo training and receive compensation for their work. However, one might wonder if this process would be circumvented, similar to how other leaders handle such matters. Story 112. Punitive fines should be proportional to the violator's net worth and income. For corporate fines, the calculation should be based on the greater of either the owner's or the corporation's net worth and earnings. When a punitive fine cannot be evaluated, alternative social measures should be considered to rehabilitate the offender. The option will be provided to either repay a base amount determined by the offense through community service or accept rehabilitation. If the offender chooses rehabilitation, they will receive evaluations and an eventual graduation. A low-interest loan will be provided to cover the rehabilitation program, and securing employment will be a requirement for graduation. Support will be offered through simple classes tailored to individual evaluations. A maximum payment amount for the program will be established, after which the government will assist with funding. If the evaluators exhaust all options and determine that the offender is not meeting requirements, an offer will be made to forgive the loan in exchange for community service at the federal minimum wage rate. Failure to attend community service by specified dates, as mandated by court orders, will result in imprisonment, and the offender will have to repay the loan at a quarter of the federal minimum wage through prison labor. Story 113. If you have been convicted of any offense, you cannot be entrusted with government service. Story 114. All individuals have the right and opportunity to pursue education, critical thinking skills, and access to verifiable information throughout their lives. Story 115. Drop the principle of accountability, and if a person is arrested, most of the Human Rights Act no longer applies to them. The obvious rights remain, such as the right to life, basic food and drink, and protection from torture. However, the rest does not apply once the law is broken, regardless of where you are from. Simply put, introduce one law. If you commit a crime on British soil, you will be returned to your country of origin and barred from entering the United Kingdom once you have served your punishment. Now, don't get me started on repeat offenders. The only reason they reoffend is that we, as a society, allow it to happen. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.